What if your husband told you on your wedding night that he never wanted you and only married you for one reason? Not love, not companionship, not even respect. Just a reason. A role he needed you to play. And in that moment, everything you believed about your marriage completely changed. Because this isn't a love story. This is something much darker. This is the story of a girl who wasn't a wife, she was a cover. But what he didn't know was that she wouldn't stay silent.
I would never marry a girl like you, he said coldly. I didn't give you the right to refuse. I only needed one thing, a child with a legitimate name. He didn't even look at me when he said it. Not once, not like a man who had just gotten married, more like a man signing a contract he didn't care about. That was the first thing my husband ever said to me. No hello, no welcome, no hesitation, just truth, cold, clean, cruel, and in that moment, something inside me didn't break, it didn't shatter, it didn't collapse, it went completely still. Because I understood something most people never realize until it's too late. I wasn't his wife. I was a solution. The room looked perfect. Soft golden lights, white roses, silk curtains moving gently in the air. Everything looked like the beginning of a beautiful life. Everything was a lie. The moment the door closed behind him, the illusion disappeared. Zayan walked past me like I wasn't even there, removed his watch, placed it carefully on the table, loosened his cuff. Like he had just come back from a meeting, not a wedding. I hope you understand this clearly, he said calmly. His tone wasn't angry, that's what made it worse. This marriage wasn't my choice. My fingers tightened around the edge of my dress, but I didn't speak, because somewhere deep inside I already knew. He finally looked at me. His eyes were empty. No anger, no emotion, just distance. I have no interest in you, he continued. You were never my type. A pause then, but you were useful. That word didn't hurt, it erased me. I needed a clean name, he said, a proper wife, a future child no one could question. Not love, not partnership, not respect, just legitimacy. That night I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I didn't ask why. I sat there long after he turned away, listening to his calm breathing, watching the ceiling, counting seconds, because something inside me had already changed. I wasn't heartbroken, I was aware. Zayan Shah, a name that carried power. People respected him, feared him, admired him. He was everything society rewards. Successful, controlled, untouchable, and I was chosen because I was invisible, simple, quiet, decent. The kind of girl people don't question, the kind of girl people don't notice. The kind of girl who disappears into someone else's life without leaving a trace. But I wasn't always invisible. There was a time when I laughed loudly. When my father used to call me his brave girl, when life felt possible. After he died, everything changed. The house felt heavier, silence stretched longer, even the walls felt tired. Bills started stacking faster than hope. Electricity, rent, medicine. I remember one night my mother sitting at the table pretending to calculate something, but her hands weren't moving. She was just staring. That was the moment I realized we were losing everything. Then Zayan's family entered our lives, not like heroes, like negotiators. They didn't offer help. They offered a deal. This marriage, I said no, I remember it clearly. I don't want this. My voice was firm, confident, alive, but life doesn't ask what you want. My mother's health declined. Hospital visits increased. Doctors started speaking in softer tones. Bills became impossible. And suddenly, my no didn't matter anymore, because survival doesn't leave space for pride, so I didn't say yes. I just stopped resisting. The days after the wedding were worse than I imagined. Not because of shouting, not because of cruelty, because of absence. Zayan didn't yell, he didn't insult me loudly. He didn't need to, his silence did everything. You don't need to act like a wife, he told me one morning. Just behave properly, that's enough. At the dining table, I didn't exist. Servants acknowledged me more than he did. I once tried to speak just a simple question. He didn't even respond, like my voice didn't reach him. In public, I was perfect. He held my hand. Spoke gently, introduced me proudly. My wife. The words sounded real, convincing, but inside the house, it meant nothing. Weeks passed, and I learned how to exist without being seen. How to speak without being heard, how to live without being acknowledged. until the day everything changed. I was in his study, placing a file on his desk, then his phone lit up, just for a second. But that second changed everything. A message appeared. "You promised our child would never be hidden." My entire world went silent. That night I didn't sleep, not because I was shocked. Because I was connecting everything, every cold word, every distance, every lie. This wasn't a marriage, this was a cover. The next morning I became someone else, not weak, not broken, strategic. I started observing, listening, learning. Within days I heard her name, Meher, and everything changed again. Meher did not speak immediately. She just looked at me for a long moment, like she was trying to decide whether I was another threat sent by his family or the first person who had finally come looking for the truth. Then she lowered herself onto the edge of the chair and let out a breath so shaky it sounded painful. "I didn't know," she said quietly. "I swear I didn't know he was getting married until it was already done." I stayed standing for a second before finally sitting across from her. The room was silent except for the ticking of a cheap wall clock and the distant noise of traffic outside. There was something heartbreaking about how normal everything looked in that apartment. Folded laundry, a half-empty glass, a tiny pair of baby socks draped over the arm of the sofa, evidence of a life that had been pushed into a corner and told to stay quiet. Meher's hands trembled as she reached for a folder on the table. "I thought he loved me," she said. "That's the part that still makes me hate myself." I didn't say anything. Because I knew that feeling, not the love, the humiliation that comes after realizing someone was never speaking to your heart, only to your weakness. "He was different with me at first," she continued. "Not kind exactly, but attentive. He listened. He remembered things. He asked about my family. He made me feel like I mattered." She gave a short, bitter laugh. "Men like him are very good at that. They don't need to love you, they only need to study you." That line stayed with me. "They only need to study you?" "I didn't ask him for marriage," she said. "He brought it up. He said he needed time because of family expectations. He said his mother was difficult. He said once things calmed down, he would make it official." Her fingers tightened around the folder. "Then I got pregnant." She said it so simply that it landed harder than if she had cried. "At first I thought maybe that would make him stop hiding me." She looked down at her lap. "I was stupid." "No," I said quietly, "you trusted the wrong man." "That's not the same thing." She looked up at me then, almost surprised. For a second I think she expected judgment. Maybe that was what she had gotten from everyone else. But I wasn't there to blame her. I was there because both of us had been chosen for different versions of the same lie. "What happened after you told him?" I asked. Her mouth tightened. "He changed overnight." The words came slower now, heavier. "He stopped answering my calls. When he did reply, it was always short. He told me not to be emotional. Not to make problems bigger than they were." Her voice hardened. "Then one day he told me his family had found a solution." My stomach turned. "I was moved here 2 days later," she said, looking around the small apartment. "Rent paid in advance, expenses covered, one condition." She slid the folder across the table. Silence. Inside were bank transfer receipts, medical records, screenshots, and printed messages. My eyes moved quickly over each page, but every line hit like a slap. One message read, "You need to be patient. This is bigger than both of us." Another, "Do not contact my family directly. You will only make this worse for yourself." And then the ugliest one, "I told you I would handle it. Stop behaving irrationally." I looked up. "He called this handling it?" I asked. Meher smiled without humor. "He called everything handling it." Then she reached into the folder and took out her phone. "There's more." She pressed play. His voice filled the room, calm, controlled, familiar. "My family needs a clean girl for the image. I'll handle everything later." I felt my blood go cold. Even though I had expected something like that, hearing it out loud was different. There was no room left for hope after that. No chance that I had misunderstood. No possibility that there was some kinder explanation buried underneath it all. He had chosen me because I looked respectable enough to hide his mess. And he had chosen her because he thought she would be easier to bury. I sat back slowly. For a few seconds I couldn't speak. Meher watched me carefully. Did you know any of this before you married him? I shook my head. No, I said. I only knew he didn't want me. That doesn't make it better. No, I said. It makes it clearer. The room fell silent again. Then she asked the question I had been avoiding in my own mind. What are you going to do? I looked at the folder between us, at the receipts, the reports, the proof, and then I thought of my wedding night, his voice, his indifference, the way he had looked at me like I was not a person, only a convenience. I'm going to make sure he loses the one thing he values more than power, I said. What's that? Control? Meher stared at me for a second, then for the first time she smiled. Not because she was happy, because she understood. I left her apartment with the folder in my bag and something new in my chest. Not rage, not panic, purpose. That night when I returned to the Shah house, the marble floors looked the same. The chandeliers still glowed. The staff still moved quietly. Everything looked untouched. But I wasn't the same woman who had walked out that afternoon. At dinner, Zayan barely acknowledged me as usual. He spoke to his mother about business, to his father about an event, to me, nothing. And for the first time, I was grateful because silence gave me room to plan. The next few weeks were about patience. I became more careful than ever, softer, more useful, more forgettable. Exactly what they had trained me to be. His mother started trusting me with things she never would have before. Event schedules, guest confirmations, seating arrangements, foundation paperwork, public relations notes. The more invisible I became, the more access I gained. And then the perfect opportunity appeared, the Shah family's annual charity gala. A room full of cameras, socialites, investors, reporters, and board members. A room full of people who worshipped image. And Zayan was being honored, family legacy excellence. The irony was so sharp it almost made me laugh. For a week I said nothing. I helped choose table settings, reviewed guest names, smiled when spoken to. Stood beside his mother like the obedient wife she thought I had become. And all the while, the folder stayed hidden where no one would think to look. The morning of the event, Zayan finally spoke more than one sentence to me. You'll wear the silver one, he said without looking up from his coffee. I looked at him. The silver what? He frowned like my question had inconvenienced him. The dress my mother chose. Don't make simple things difficult. Simple things, that was what he called every demand he made. I lowered my eyes and said nothing. By then, I knew something he didn't. By the end of the night, the dress wouldn't matter, nothing would. The gala was everything wealthy people love pretending matters. Crystal glasses, perfect smiles, carefully rehearsed generosity. Women in diamonds, men in tailored suits. Conversations polished so smoothly they sounded fake before they even ended. I stood beside Zayan while cameras flashed. He looked perfect, collected, untouchable. The kind of man no one imagines falling. That is why the fall hurts more when it happens. When his name was announced, the room erupted into applause. He walked toward the stage with that same measured confidence he wore like a second skin. His mother's face glowed with pride. His father sat straighter, and I felt strangely calm. He adjusted the microphone and smiled at the crowd. Family, he began, is not simply about blood. It is about responsibility, legacy, and honor, and lies, I said. My voice was not loud. It didn't need to be. The silence that followed was immediate, absolute. Every head turned, every camera shifted. I stepped forward before anyone could stop me. Zayan's expression changed for the first time since I had known him. Not guilt, not shame, fear, small, sharp, real. I walked onto the stage slowly, each step steady, each breath measured. When I reached him, I turned to face the audience. Then I held up the folder. Since we're talking about family legacy, I said clearly, perhaps we should also talk about the woman he paid to disappear and the child he tried to hide. The room exploded into whispers. Zayan grabbed my wrist hard enough to hurt. What are you doing? He hissed under his breath. I looked down at his hand, then back up at him. What you should have feared from the beginning? I pulled my wrist free, then I took out the copies, the transfers, the medical documents, the messages, and finally the recording. When his voice echoed through the ballroom speakers, the entire room froze again. My family needs a clean girl for the image. I'll handle everything later. No one moved for a second. Then the room broke apart. Phones rose into the air. People stood. Journalists started whispering into each other's ears. One of the investors near the front looked physically ill. His mother's face went pale. His father didn't move at all. Zayan stepped toward me like he was going to stop me, but by then it was too late. The truth had already been heard. And the thing about truth is this: once it enters a room full of people who survive on appearances, it spreads faster than fire. I don't remember leaving the stage. I only remember the noise. Questions, shock, movement, and somewhere behind all of it, the sound of a man's life cracking open. The next 48 hours were brutal, exactly as I had hoped. The story spread quickly. First through social circles, then online, then through media outlets that had once praised the Shah family's charity work and business discipline. The headlines were merciless. Corporate heir accused of cover-up. Marriage used to protect family image. Secret pregnancy scandal rocks elite family. By the second day, one investor publicly withdrew. By the third, the foundation announced an internal review. By the fourth, the award he had received that night was revoked, and his family. They did what families like theirs always do when image is threatened. They stepped away from the person who had become too expensive to defend. He came to me on the fifth day. I was in the sitting room, signing paperwork. He didn't sit, he didn't soften, he just stood there looking more exhausted than I had ever seen him. "You ruined me," he said. I placed the pen down carefully and looked up at him. "No," I said, "I revealed you." His jaw tightened. "You could have come to me." I almost laughed and said, "What?" "That I finally understood why you bought me." For the first time, he looked away, just for a second, but I saw it, that tiny fracture in his control. "I did what I had to do," he said. I stood then. "So did I." He looked back at me. There was anger there and disbelief, but something else too: confusion. Because men like him never expect consequences from women they think they've already reduced. "What do you want?" he asked. I didn't hesitate. "Divorce." He stared at me. And for the first time since our wedding night, it was him who looked like the ground had shifted. I walked away from that marriage with nothing from that house. No jewelry, no money, no favors. No settlement I hadn't earned, because what I wanted could never be written into a check. I wanted my name back, my silence back, my self-respect back, and I took all of it. Later, I heard that Meher had filed her own legal case. This time, she wasn't alone. This time, there were records, witnesses, attention. And attention, in families like theirs, is more dangerous than any courtroom. Months later, I moved into a small apartment with sunlight in the kitchen and peeling paint near the window. It was nothing compared to the Shah mansion, and yet it felt bigger because it was mine. Some endings are loud, mine was, it was quiet, steady, clean, the way healing often is. He once told me I had no right to refuse, but in the end, I didn't just refuse him, I chose myself, and he was left behind with the one thing he had spent his whole life trying to control: the truth.